Miss Marvel is a 2014 Marvel's comic book written by J. Willow Wilson. It follows the story of a young teenage girl named Kamala Khan, a Pakistani-American girl who idolized superheroes when growing up, mainly one Carol Danvers, or better known as the superhero Captain Marvel. Her biggest challenges while growing up are trying to balance her family's beliefs with the society she lives in, all the while trying to fit in at school and deal with normal problems that come with being a teenager. Kamala is someone who carries latent inhuman abilities in her genetics until Black Bolt, another Inhuman, releases a bomb into the Earth's atmosphere that awakens the innate abilities of what is now known as the New Humans worldwide. Some people would call these innate abilities mutations. The innate abilities Kamala has in her genes allow her to extend her limbs, shapeshift, enlarge and shrink her body, and heal from any injury she sustains. And now, after attaining these superpowers with the help of her best friend Bruno and the new Inhumans and mutants she meets along the way, she chooses to carry on the legacy of her hero to make the world a better and safer place. Starting in the streets of New Jersey, she adorns the name Miss Marvel. So what the fuck is this bullshit? This is gonna be fun. What's up guys, Tyron here, and despite what you saw in the intro, I really love superhero movies. I really love Marvel and the DCAU. Yeah, I really love the DCAU because unlike the live action counterparts, the DCAU knows how to tell a coherent story. But DC isn't the topic of today's discussion, Marvel is. Now initially I wanted to make a video about the decline in Marvel and its shows and movies over the last couple of years, because I've personally felt like over these last few years the quality in Marvel's output is and has been steadily declining in quality. And now before the keyboard warriors come at my neck and say, actually
Spider-Man No Way Home hit 800 million at the box office, so you're wrong.
Box office sales and money has nothing to do with how good the product actually is. For example, the Batman made 269 million worldwide, but the movie, in my opinion, was boring.
What?
I'm sorry, but as much as I like Batman, this movie was absolutely boring to watch. And this is the same thing that has been plaguing Marvel recently. Marvel, or should I say Disney, just feel like they're bag chasers at this point. With the release of Spider-Man No Way Home, the MCU started what they now call the multiverse saga, and at first I thought this was a great idea. Marvel started teasing the multiverse way back in 2016 with the first Doctor Strange movie, and with the announcement of the newest saga and phase of the MCU and the shows and movies that have come out before and since its announcement, I've started feeling like Marvel doesn't care about trying to make fun superhero movies and shows anymore. It just feels like instead of trying to make good compelling stories, everything feels like a chance to shoehorn in a cameo from a well-known Marvel character from previous movies. But I will say that expanding the MCU has allowed for more leeway into introducing new characters, such as the subject for today's video, Miss Marvel. But before we continue with the video, let me give a quick shout out to GC Raven 42, Tom Watley, Gary Grunwald, Stephanie Schroed, and Brennan Wilson for subscribing. I appreciate the sub. And as always, if you would like to be part of this community, don't forget to smack that like button into oblivion and continue beating the subscribe button. Let's get to 50 subscribers and let's set the like goal to 40 this time. And please leave a comment because I really want to hear what you guys have to say about Miss Marvel. So let's have a discussion about this. And with that, let's get on with the video.
We are strong, we are
Ice cream pizza?
and we will fight!
Miss Marvel is probably one of the messiest Marvel shows and adaptations to be released. I genuinely can't explain to you the visual whiplash that this show gave me. From its messy pacing to the terrible acting to the jank as hell visual, god awful CGI to the horrendous reimagining of Miss Marvel's superpowers to the god awful villains, the unlikable characters, and the short 6-episode runtime with everything cramped into 4 40 minutes. The show ends up being one of the worst adapted things Marvel has spawned from its money-making machine. It baffles me to think that the creator of the original comic gave the go-ahead to make this absolute dumpster fire of a show. But I'm sure you're wondering, probably confused viewer who wants to give the show a chance but hasn't gotten the chance to watch it. Well, the show can't be all that bad, Mr. Redux, right? Right? Well, to answer your question, my dear viewer, you are right. The show isn't all that bad. If there is one thing that I will give credit to in the show is the colorful aesthetic of it. Episode 1 to episode 3 are the most visually entertaining things to watch when it comes to the VFX outside of Kamala's powers and the god-awful CGI. Small cool details like Kamala retelling Avengers Endgame with paperclip art, to the scene with her and Bruno walking, discussing how to make her costume look, all the while the graffiti on the wall next to them changes to match their conversation. Yes, I know I sound really pedantic, but that's because these small details are so cool that ignoring them is nigh impossible. But that being said though, this is as far as my enjoyment for this show goes, and I mainly attribute that to Edgar Wright, the man who directed the Scott Pilgrim movie. If you are someone who likes small details in a well-directed movie or show, go watch Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Don't watch this. This is a terrible show. And I'll continue explaining to you why I think the show is terrible. So let's talk about the pacing and the characterization of the show. When it comes to storytelling and telling a great story, there needs to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning introduces us to our characters, their motives, what they are like, and why they do the things they do. The middle, in my opinion, is where you're supposed to keep your story engaging by reaffirming characters and their motivations, or you use it to show how our characters are in distress based on the situations they are in due to the initial conflict that was set up in the beginning of the story. Then we get the end, which is used to wrap up any remaining conflicts or show us how our characters have grown on their journey until the end of the story. Spider-Man Homecoming and the Thor trilogy know how to do this really well. In Spider-Man Homecoming, after Peter gets the new suit from Tony Stark and is recruited in Civil War, Homecoming shows how Peter's character starts to change. In the beginning, you can see Peter's desire to be an Avenger, but in that he forgets his responsibility in becoming the protector of New York. The middle portion of the movie shows us his downfall when Tony Stark takes away the suit he gave him.
Oh, no, please, Mr.
Let's
Stark,
have it.
you don't understand. Please, this is all I have. I'm nothing without this suit.
If you're nothing without this suit, then you shouldn't have it.
This is where he starts to learn that he doesn't need to be an Avenger to be a hero. That's why he finds the strength to lift the rubble off himself, and in the end he doesn't take Tony Stark's offer to be an Avenger or accept the Iron Spider suit because again, he realizes that he doesn't need to be an Avenger to be a hero.
Thank you, Mr. Stark. But I'm good.
Next is Thor. Thor's journey happens over the course of 3 of his own solo movies and concludes in Avengers Endgame. From the beginning, Thor is shown to be a very arrogant character as each of the movies happen from Thor to Thor Ragnarok and Avengers Endgame. His arrogance slowly disappears as he realizes the responsibility he carries as being the future king of Asgard. The middle portion of his story happens in Avengers Endgame. It's only after he meets his mother in the past that he finally learns that the responsibility he's burdened himself with isn't who he's meant to be, as his failure to kill Thanos because he didn't go for the hit in Avengers Infinity War causes him to spiral into a depression. That's why he gives up the throne to Valkyrie at the end of the movie and sets out to find himself and find his actual purpose. The pacing, the characterization of these movies and these characters is done really well. Sure, there are still a lot of issues, but as a whole, these movies do tell a cohesive story and the characters have good arcs throughout it.
But Mr. Redux, you can't compare shows to movies that spent almost a decade in storytelling to a show that just came out.
But I can, my dear viewer, because when it comes to pacing and characterization, Miss Marvel is absolutely horrendous. Oh boy, where do I even begin? Kamala Khan is a really unlikable character, and please don't think I'm shaming the actor Aman Vellani. I think her and all the other cast members are doing their absolute best to try and save the story, but at the speed at which the story is going, this shit could make a cheetah jealous. From episode 1, Kamala's introduction into the story is very messy. She comes off as a very quirky, sociable girl when she retells the events of Avengers Endgame, but the moment she gets to school after failing her test, she goes from someone whose personality seems like a complete 180 from what we saw a few minutes earlier. This is one of the first plot holes in the show. Kamala isn't a consistent character. One moment she's goofy, quirky, and overconfident, next she's socially awkward and can't talk to people when she gets to school. One moment she's saving people who her love interest is clearly trying to kill, but the next moment she's trying to sympathize with them and let him escape. Kamala's inconsistent character makes watching the show a bit unbearable at times, and to make it worse, she never suffers any consequences for her actions. There isn't any visible character growth throughout her story arc. For 6 episodes, she's constantly switching her motives and doesn't stay consistent on anything. An example of this is something I mentioned earlier with Kamala crying for the person who literally tried to kill her an episode ago. To give more context, these people are what is referred to as Jinn. They save Kamala when she's being chased by government agents at the end of episode 2, but then they try to kill her later in episode 3 because she said she would help them, but she hasn't fully mastered her powers even after they gave her some time to think about helping them. Then, after said assassination attempt, when they finally open the portal into the world of the Jinn and can see that the energy the portal is emanating is destroying and killing everything around it, Kamala, who literally saw these people try to kill her, fucking cries at the fact that the person, the lunatic who tried to kill her moments ago, shouldn't take the risk of possibly killing herself, all because she has a son that she left behind. Just stop, please! And Kamala isn't the only character guilty of this. Everyone in this mess of a show is equally as inconsistent in their characterization. Kamala's parents are equally as guilty of this. Going back to episode 1, there's an event called Avengers Con that Kamala wants to go to, but her parents don't want her to go because they're the stereotypical, no, we can't let you go out into the world. We trust you, but not really though. And you know, this kinda gave me hope. I thought that the writers would tell a story similar to Spider-Man, one in which Kamala has to keep her identity secret from anyone who isn't Bruno and her friend Nakia. This would build up both of their character arcs as her parents start to see her as someone who's responsible and can take care of herself if and when the time comes. But no, instead we get this shitty interaction where she gets told that she needs to decide on who she wants to be at the end of episode 1, and by the start of episode 6, her entire family is just cool that they have a superpowered mutant in their family. I could spend forever talking about why I hate each and every individual character, with Bruno, Nakia, and Amir being the only exceptions, because everyone outside of these characters is genuinely unlikable. But this video doesn't need to be 1 hour long, so instead let's move on to the next thing I really hate about this show, and that's the pacing. Also, if you're still here and made it this far into the video, consider subscribing and liking this video. Now, earlier in the video I brought up how Spider-Man Homecoming and the Thor movies pace their movies in ways that allow the MC to grow and learn throughout the runtime of their respective movies. This isn't the case for Ms. Marvel. Firstly, throughout the show's 6-episode runtime, the plot moves from plot point to plot point to plot point. The show doesn't give itself enough time to catch up on story beats before we move on into the next story relevant plot. Characters don't get enough time to leave an impact because we don't linger on them for too long. wrong. One thing I really hate is that we don't see the actual problem that comes with Kamala discovering that she has powers. There isn't any form of reflection on the fact that she now has superhuman abilities. No moment where she realizes that her powers now make her a protector and that people are counting on her, and if she makes one mistake she could be the reason that someone dies. Instead, we get this moment where she does save someone, almost kills the person she saved, gets scared and feels shame at what she did for a few minutes before she gets chased by government officials, and then it's on to the next plot point. The show's lackluster pacing doesn't allow for any moment of respite. It just keeps moving too fast to allow for any moment to breathe. And it's even worse because moments where Kamala does get the chance to absorb what people are saying or the situations themselves, they don't stick for too long. It doesn't stay in her mind for too long before we're pushed into the next story beat. I'd understand if this was a fast-paced show that was more action-driven rather than story-driven. It would make the pacing a little bit more tolerable, but it isn't. It's clearly trying to tell the origin of Miss Marvel, but it's not letting me get invested or showing me anything about her that can make me like her or want to root for her. It feels like the writers are trying to meet a deadline, and that's why all of these episodes feel like they're trying to compress the story to fit the 40-minute runtime. And I honestly do see the potential in this show. I'm not making this video to be negative, I'm making it to voice my opinion about why I don't like the show because of how much of its own potential it's wasting. With that, I don't think there's anything more I can say about this show. Fuck. Listen, I don't want to be one of those guys that hop on the usage of CGI when it comes to the MCU. Everyone has their problems with it and I honestly don't care about it. A lot of effort was put into these scenes to make them look as good as they were. They just didn't turn out good at all. My biggest problem with the CGI is how goofy it looks. It's not bad at all. It's just not nice to look at. Certain scenes like when Kamran and Kamala use their powers are just really ugly to look at. Oh my god, their powers. What the hell is this? Why the hell does Miss Marvel have chocolate crystals for hands? Why aren't her powers like they are in the original source material? Why is this scene so ugly? Why can Kamran have the ability to disintegrate objects with his powers when he's mad in one scene but fails to do it again in a later scene? Why does Miss Marvel have the ability to time travel? Huh? Wait a minute, why does Miss Marvel have the ability to time travel and affect the past? If I recall, Avengers Endgame established that if you travel back to the past, that past becomes your future, so you can't affect the future if you travel to the past. So why the hell can Miss Marvel affect the future when she's the person who traveled to the past to guide her grandmother back to her grandfather?
Actually, the director said—
Shut up, bitch!
Listen, I get that the directors came out and said that they didn't break their own rule, especially since it's been established Kang is the person who basically controls everything going on in the MCU, which is still confusing. Does this make sense to any of you? Kamala, who in this adaptation of the story is related to the race of Jinn, which are beings from another dimension that can time travel. From my knowledge, Miss Marvel doesn't have the ability to time travel. Her powers are listed as having super strength, super durability, shape-shifting, superhuman speed, and bioluminescence. Nowhere in this list are the abilities time travel mentioned. That would mean that the directors clearly broke the rules of their own established universe. I don't want to keep talking about this. In conclusion, this show is a mess and not the good kind. And listen, if you enjoyed this show, don't let this video change your opinion. My views on this show shouldn't change how you feel about it. I personally just feel like the show had so much potential that it wasted because of the inconsistent characters, the pacing, the messy CGI, the cringy moments that were spread throughout it, and the terrible writing. Marvel can honestly do so much better because over these last couple of years, it seems like they've realized that anything they put out will make them a lot of money, and that has caused them to become very greedy. I don't know if it's just me, but if this is the quality of shows and movies I'm getting from the guys that gave us memorable movies and shows like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Avengers Endgame, then I'm really scared for the future. What's up guys, Tyron here. If you made it to the end of the video, I really appreciate all of you guys for watching, and again, I really appreciate everyone who subscribed, and I do want to remind you guys to leave a comment. Tell me what you think of the show, tell me if you disagree with what I said, why, and we can have a discussion about it. Until then, I'll see y'all later.